Hey, everybody, and welcome to our session today. I'm Buzz Bishop, a radio host in Calgary, Alberta, and I'm proud to be a champion for the Canadian Men's Health Foundation this year as we dig deep into this month devoted to men's health. And our theme, Move for Your Mental Health. The COVID-19 pandemic has taken a significant toll on the mental well-being of Canadian men and their families. If there was ever a time to start taking our mental health more seriously, it's now. The Canadian Men's Health Foundation and our partner Anxiety Canada are committed to improving the resources available to men struggling with their mental health. Move for Your Mental Health is a call to action for Canadian men and their families to move for men's mental health in June. And there's something for everyone. Move for your mental health in a time of uncertainty. Learn something new about coping with stress, anxiety, and loneliness. Inspire others with helpful tools and strategies, and fundraise for mental health programming to help more men live healthier. Thank you to our partner, Anxiety Canada, for making today's event possible. Now, as the COVID-19 global pandemic moves into its 16th month, many of us continue to deal with heightened levels of stress and anxiety around our careers, our families, and our health. At the same time, many of us are feeling isolated while facing these challenges. Children and teenagers living in our households are experiencing stressors and anxieties of their own. These stresses and anxieties may be related to school, social lives, or could be signs of developing anxiety disorder. The question we want to address today: how to parent children that have anxiety, and how to parent when you yourself are dealing with anxiety. We're very lucky to have retired NHL goaltender and Hockey Night in Canada broadcaster and Anxiety Canada champion Kelly Hrudey, along with his daughter Caitlin Jones, with us today to share their stories. And we're also joined by Dr. Robert Sellis, a registered psychologist and postdoctoral fellow with the provincial OCD program at BC's Children's Hospital. Dr. Sellis is a member of Anxiety Canada's scientific committee and will be sharing some expert advice, recommendations, and resources to help men and their families struggling with stress and anxiety. Welcome to all of you. Thanks for making the time to join in today. Let's start with you, Caitlin. Can you tell us a little bit about your anxiety disorder and what were your symptoms growing up?
So for me, my anxiety really started to get bad the summer before grade 7. I started getting these thoughts in my head, mostly about getting different diseases or getting sick or dying. And in order for those things not to happen, my brain told me that I needed to be close to my parents, specifically my mom. So at the beginning of the summer, when I would get those thoughts, I was able to control them a bit, ignore them, push them back. But as the summer progressed, they got stronger and I would believe them. So I would start canceling plans with friends, or I used to dance competitively and I would not show up to dance camp or things like that. And I think at first I had lots of individual symptoms that, we've talked about before. We never, especially my parents, never put it together all in one. So I'm sure there were lots of signs or symptoms that I was expressing, but we just didn't know at the time. So then the first day of grade 7 came and I couldn't get out of the car. I was having a full meltdown. I was crying and begging my mom not to make me go to school because I thought all those bad things that I was thinking about would happen if I had to leave her. So that was the very beginning. At that point, we kind of realized as a family that this was something bigger than us and I needed professional help. So my mom ended up opening the phone book. I don't even know if it exists anymore, but and she found the first child psychologist there and she called, and I don't know why we got so lucky, but we did. And they were able to fit me in that day to go see the psychologist. And from there, there's been really tough times, but it's a good journey in the end.
So you were 12 years old and recognizing, Kelly, was it something that you as parents recognized the need for professional help, or was it something that Caitlin pushed?
We did, but you have to understand that day that Caitlin's talking about where she couldn't get out of the car, like her life was completely unmanageable. So it's not as though there was a whole bunch of regular things going on before that. At least my part of the story is I thought she had what I called maybe peculiar habits for about a year leading up to this. And so she had this thing going on where she'd blink her eyes randomly all the time. And that was one of the thoughts that she had that would prevent her from going blind. But she had all these other things that had we put them all together, all these signs, as Caitlin mentioned, I think we would have come to the conclusion sooner that maybe there's something going on that we should talk about or address. We didn't. And I have to tell you, I'm not ashamed of that because we didn't know trouble was lurking. We didn't know about mental health issues. We didn't understand what Caitlin was going through. We didn't understand what we were dealing with as a family. And so to us, it was kind of like, okay, now that we're at this stage where she can't get out of the car, it's crucial. We have to do something to get her help because it's clearly evident that something is going on. And as Caitlin said, going in that summer, again, she was begging off things that she loved. So we would ask her questions, but she always had what we seemed like a plausible answer, right? There was always a really good excuse for why she couldn't go to a sleepover. And it might be something like, well, I don't really get along with that person as much as I used to, and I don't hang out with her as often. And just all these excuses that, you know, if you're not really looking out for signs of mental health, they kind of make sense, right? And so for us at that particular day was when it was, and the following days when she was getting extensive therapy, that's kind of when we really understood what we were dealing with.
It's along with many things, right? When you look back in hindsight, you can see all of the things that added up to get you there. And so conversations like this, or hopefully people can notice the pebbles along the path. What did you have to do after her diagnosis? What kind of support did she need to get through with her day-to-day routine from you as parents?
Well, we're going to have different stories here because we had to do things that we didn't want to do that made her very uncomfortable and forced her to do things that she didn't think she could do or she was unwilling to try. I think it's safe to say she kind of hated us for a little bit. I mean,
I did.
But you know, those were steps that needed to be taken. And so we had to remain strong, although it was really difficult. Like after a while, when she started to have the ability to maybe go to dance for a little while, we literally had to drop her off, make sure she got in the door, and then we pretended as though we drove home. Well, clearly we wouldn't do that because there's, you know, ramifications in case she turned around or somehow made an excuse to the teacher that she needed to leave or we were waiting for her. So we would basically just park in an adjacent parking lot. So we had eyes on the front door to the dance studio, and we would sit there for hours. You know, if that's the case, she only had one class, you know, it would be there for an hour, but typically on certain days, she had long days, right? Because she is really involved in dance. So I remember Donna said something like one day she was there for 9 hours, like in the parking lot, but you have to do it. School was tremendous. Once she was able to finally make her way back to school, she would go and sit in the principal's office for say an hour or something. And then I think you did that for a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
And then she was able to go into a class for 15 minutes or half an hour, I believe, and just sort of slowly work her way back into her routine as a grade 7-year-old or a 7-year-old. So, you know, no, grade 7. I'll get there. You go. We're going back a long time, but right. You know, it was just so hard for us, and we had to remain strong. And you know, there are times where you feel really weak, but you couldn't, you know, you couldn't be weak around Kate. We had to ensure that we were the safety. One thing that I have to mention, because it was so important in her getting better, there was this exercise that we had to go through with her breathing, and she called it her garden, her safe place. And the breathing that she and I did was just, it really brought us together. So some days, luckily, it might be an hour or two. Sometimes it'd be 3 or 4 hours or more, which is difficult when you're in the same household. let alone I travel a lot, right? So sometimes I'd be on the road and we'd have these marathon 4-hour phone calls and trying to get her to her garden, which was a beautiful experience. I got to tell you, that was really rewarding.
Well, let's bring in Dr. Sellis now to get the clinical side of this. Dr. Sellis, can you tell us a little bit more about some common anxiety disorders that kids and teens might be experiencing?
Yeah, certainly. So anxiety itself is a functional human emotion. It's something that's very important, that serves a survival function. It can warn you about things that are dangerous and sort of provide you with instincts about what to do to keep you safe. Unfortunately, like Caitlin described, it can get sort of oversensitive or focused on things that you don't really have control over, and or sort of provide suggestions that maybe don't actually keep you any safer or resolve that issue. And so what happens is then all of a sudden anxiety gets trapped in this cycle where you're trying to do more and more to sort of help yourself survive, but it's not actually influencing that thing at all. And so you end up spinning your wheels and sort of losing control of things. So where anxiety comes from is sort of typically lots of normal things. In Caitlin's example, it was her family's health, people that she cares a lot about and really values. For other people, it might be their friends. So they're really worried about their social interactions and whether or not people like them, or are afraid to enter into social situations because they think they might be embarrassed or something bad might happen. They might get really focused on their own personal health, like I'm going to get sick or be contaminated with something. Sometimes people get thoughts that they just don't want to have or can't seem to control, like they're a bad person or they're going to hurt someone, and it makes them really afraid because they don't want to do those things. And so then they feel like they have to engage in lots of behaviors to protect themselves or to protect other people. Sometimes people just worry about kind of everything that's going on in their life. Am I a good enough student? Do people like me? Will I get in trouble? What's happening in the world? So anxiety disorders really are when you have this sort of worry that's sort of taking over more and more of life and sort of spinning out of control more and more.
And Kelly talked about looking back on it and seeing signs that would have helped him figure out that something was wrong. Is blinking a sign? Is avoiding people a sign? Are they typical, or are there certain things, or is it just a generalization and everybody's different?
It can definitely manifest differently for different people. So to give you one specific sign, I think would sort of oversell anything. But you know, the one that Kelly mentioned in terms of these were things that she really enjoyed, that she maybe was typically motivated by in the past. And all of a sudden, there seems to be more and more things getting in the way of that. And whether it's anxiety or perhaps depression or any other thing, that can often be a good indication that maybe something's going on. That the things that typically were sort of valuable or important or functional for your child are starting to get missed or put aside because of emotions or other worries and things like that.
Caitlin, the triggers that you talked about at the beginning were for your own personal health and for your parents' health. The past 16 months, I know your anxiety was before, but we live with it every day. How have you gone through the pandemic?
So it's been hard, but like my family's really close. I have 2 older sisters and their partners and stuff, and we always try and keep in contact just to try and get each other through the hard times. But it's funny because one of my other sisters mentioned, she's like, how am I, like me, Caitlin, the most calm during the pandemic compared to everyone else? And it's because this is my life. Like I have been in a pandemic since grade 7.
Yeah, for sure.
This is me. Like everyone is experiencing my brain right now. So, I mean, of course it's been hard, and I definitely really fight to make sure that I don't fall into those habits or that loop that gets in my head. And luckily my husband is really great with me. He can help me rationalize, and my parents and my sisters. But yeah, I mean, I think I've been really lucky in a sense that I have tools to help myself through situations like this. But I know there's lots of people that are struggling and they don't have those tools yet.
Mhm.
So the more we're talking about it, the better it will be for everyone, just to get the exposure out there and to know that asking for help is okay.
Right. Kelly, you went through a period of self-doubt when you were playing with the Kings, and Tony Robbins came in and helped pull you out of that. Is that anything that you were able to draw on in dealing with Caitlin and her anxiety?
I only hesitate because looking back, yes, the idea of getting help certainly was something that I was interested in getting help for Caitlin, because I recognized how quickly it allowed me get back to playing at a high level again. So what you're talking about is in 1992-93 season. It was actually in the summer leading up to that season where, again, I didn't know this was related to mental health, but clearly it was. I started to have these thoughts. Now, my thoughts weren't similar to what Caitlin was having, but I was having thoughts of doubt. I believe I was going into my 10th year in the National Hockey League, and I knew the numbers. Most careers last ballpark around 3 years. And so I was on maybe not the best team in the world, but the most high profile team in the world because of Wayne Gretzky and living in Los Angeles and having an owner in Bruce McNall that tried to really make us popular. And so that had a lot to do with where I was mentally. That was a lot of pressure, right? And I had Donna was pregnant with Caitlin, so I was going to be a dad to 3 children. I needed to put food on the table. Just all these things were becoming overwhelming to me. So I had what I would call an episode in Milwaukee. There was a neutral site game, and I was becoming unglued, and I was able to recover for the next day and played quite well. But a week later, it was just all too much. And so finally, after about a month and a half, my coach knew I needed help, Barry Melrose. And so he put me in contact with Tony Robbins, and that changed my life and got me in a better place mentally, actually rather quickly, I'd say. It was quite surprising. In fact, now I still had plenty of work to do because I wasn't quite there for another month or two till I really felt back to being more normal. But it was really quite the journey. And so when Kate needed help, I knew immediately that we needed help. We couldn't just sort of as a family do it on our own because we don't have the tools. We don't have the expertise like Dr. Sellis, and we needed somebody to come into our life and help us.
All right, so let's bring the professional back in. Dr. Sellis, beyond anxiety disorders, can you tell us some more about general stress and anxiety that children and teens can experience? Maybe just some generalizations: school, social life, social media, those sorts of things.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if we think about anxiety, right, as this sort of natural survival system, there's all sorts of things in our lives that we have to manage and get through that can be challenging or that we're concerned about. So certainly relationships, whether it's within the family or with peers, is a common place of stress and anxiety. Functioning, like, am I good enough at school? Am I good enough at dance or a sport or the thing that I'm doing? That's a common place of stress and anxiety. What am I able to do? What am I doing in my free time? Do I have control over my life, right? For kids, often they don't have a lot of control because they have to go to school and they have to sort of do the things and follow their parents. And so anxiety sometimes can be also a way that they try to control their lives to some extent. So you can see sort of stress around what they're able to do and when they're able to do it, things like sleep, what's going on in the family. Really anything can sort of become the focus of anxiety or create some stress. And as you mentioned, social media is a huge new factor that we're starting to talk a little bit more about, like, hey, people put, behavioral things to encourage people to be interested in it and to keep looking at it, and what people put out there, we don't have a lot of control over. And so, what it can shape the way people see the world and see themselves. And so that's also definitely a factor that's at play.
When you talk about sleep, my 11-year-old has many issues around sleep. His bedtime is 8 to 8:30. He likes to go to bed. And if all of a sudden it's 8:45 or 9:15 and he's not asleep, he gets up and he starts crying. I'm not going to get the sleep I need, and he really stresses on that. So advice for me, what's a way for parents to talk them down? Is that a way to say it?
Sure, yeah. So I think the first thing to recognize is that don't try to change your child's emotions or fix them right away, because often that's parents' instincts. My child is in pain, so I need to fix it. I need to either help them make this feeling go away right away, or try to just like tell them that's not important, just go to sleep, sort of dismiss that feeling. But what that can do is either sort of rescue the child from the feeling, and then they don't learn how to sort of cope with it on their own, or sort of can make the child feel like, you don't understand me. This is really hard. Why don't you understand me? So the process is sort of to maybe first help them recognize that this is happening. You can sort of identify it. Hey, I'm noticing you're feeling really upset. It seems like you're quite worried about your sleep. Then you can do a little bit of sort of a balancing of listening and sort of empathizing and validating. So you're hearing, if he's saying, oh, I'm so worried about sleep, I don't know, I'm just not going to get enough sleep. You can empathize with how, as a 9-year-old or 11-year-old or whatever age your child is, how in their world that might seem like a really, really big deal, how it might seem just intensely scary to maybe not have enough energy the next day or things like that. So you're validating that from their perspective. That survival system is sort of making sense. Being careful not necessarily to validate maybe their demands, for example, that they have to be with you all the time, but validating like, hey, you're really afraid, and it kind of makes sense that you're afraid because you care a lot about this thing. And then once you've done that, then you can shift a little bit into like, okay, what are we gonna do about it, and try to help them sort of problem solve or support them through it.
Kelly and Caitlin, you talked about breathing techniques, easing into school and dance. What other ways would you suggest people broach the topic and have the real conversations?
Yeah, that's so important. There's a couple things I want to bring up it's really important that you ask a lot of questions, like, how are you doing today? What are you feeling? What are you going through? And as Dr. Sellis said, don't really sort of just, brush everything aside. You've got to really have an honest conversation. And one for us as parents, Donna and I had to remind ourselves once each, don't get mad at Caitlin, because it's not her. Like, you can get mad at the disease or affliction, whatever you want to call it, but don't get mad at the person, because they don't want to be that person, right? That was very important for us. The other thing, and this is really important, especially in today's world, the night before Caitlin was going to go really public with her story in 2013, I was in St. Louis working the playoffs. Caitlin was here in Calgary. And you know what one of the things I was most afraid of? Social media, because it wasn't to the level where it is now, where it's just, at times it seems out of control, and it's a horrible place to exist. Although there are good things with social media for sure, but I was afraid of all the bashers when Caitlin was going to come out and tell her story, and all the people that might try and make fun of her, or, that sentiment out there at times. What's really heartwarming, she never had anybody, not one person went after her. And that was really heartwarming. I got to tell you, that was awesome.
Caitlin, people who are struggling often just say, I'm fine. Like, how are you doing? I'm okay. How are you doing? I'm fine. How do we, as somebody who wants to help, how do we break in to have a real conversation where you can say, today is a bad day?
So I think it just sometimes comes with persistence from the other person. If I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. Like I'm normally pretty good now with being honest about how I'm doing mentally. But if my dad asks me how I'm doing and I lie and say I'm fine, you can normally gauge if someone actually is or not. And for me, at least, I appreciate when someone's like, but are you actually? Because I feel like you've been acting distant or things like that, where it's like, okay, yeah, you're right. And for me, I think the most important thing with those conversations is just knowing that people are there and that they love you. And I don't go to my parents for the tools or
Right.
the knowledge. Go to Dr. Sellis or another doctor for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Your loved ones don't have to fix anything.
Yeah.
They can be there to support you and encourage you and love you. And knowing that means more than them giving you any of those tools or the knowledge. It's just being able to talk about it and make it normal. Like if I rolled my ankle and I had a sore ankle, I wouldn't keep it from my parents. But if I am struggling with something mentally, why do I have to keep it to myself?
Mhm.
So I think it's just talking about it and yeah, just feeling like you're not alone, because you aren't. I guarantee you there are people in your life that love you and want to know how you're doing.
Mhm.
That's excellent. Dr. Sellis, the campaign is focused on physical activity to help manage stress and anxiety. How and why does that help kids and parents deal with stress?
Yeah, absolutely. So since stress and anxiety are physiological processes, right? They're things that are happening within our body, and they influence our thoughts and our behaviors, sort of then changing our body, doing things with our body can have the reverse effect. It can influence then our thinking and our behaviors as well. And there's lots of different mechanisms through which exercise can be really helpful. So one, it can reduce your sort of body's amount of, let's say your heart's beating really fast because you're quite anxious and stressed. Well, guess what? You get some exercise in, you help sort of your body down regulate some of that and expend some of that energy. So that can help. You can learn to tolerate and understand that they're sort of acceptable or normal, some of the physical sensations that can feel really uncomfortable with anxiety. So for example, if you are prone to panic attacks, you might be really sensitive to your heart beating really fast. But if you start exercising, you start realizing that your heart beating really fast is something natural that your body can do, and it doesn't have to be something that you run away from. Exercise can help us really tolerate or sit with some of those uncomfortable sensations. Running or biking or playing hockey, dancing, whatever it is, you have to push through that pain and sort of stick with that activity. And that's something that's also a really big part of working through mental health, is tolerating and sitting with sort of some of that discomfort. And then the final piece I'd say is when you take control of your body and you use it to accomplish something like exercising, you are training your body and your brain to believe in itself, to believe that you can affect change and that you're not just helpless to whatever things that come up. And that can be really powerful as well.
Yeah, or it could even be something as simple as what Kelly and Caitlin did, that meditative breathing exercise to go to the garden, just a different kind of headspace as opposed to just dealing with what's in front. What are some other resources for men who are struggling with stress and anxiety?
Yeah, so I think the first sort of circle of that is really what's available to you already, right? So as Caitlin mentioned, like there are people in your life who care about you. Connecting with them, talking about them, or talking with them, and trying to share a little bit of what's happening for you is a great first step resource. What are things that you care about or enjoy that don't involve just sitting with or sort of wrestling with that discomfort, right? Can you prioritize engaging in your hobby instead of sitting in your room worrying? Can you sort of do some of those things that take care of yourself? I'd mention Anxiety Canada, who sponsored this talk, and then the Canadian Mental Health Association. Both of them are sort of national organizations that have a lot of resources on their website, and can also help direct towards providers. And then that's sort of that final piece, right? Is if maybe the people in your life are saying, I love you and I hear you, but I also don't know how to help you, or you're really struggling, maybe you've been trying to figure this out on your own. So just to plug, like, I'm a psychologist, I know the tools, but it's hard to use the tools on yourself. Sometimes you need an expert perspective, and I struggled with a lot of the self-doubt and pressure that Kelly talked about. All of a sudden, I finished grad school, I'm an expert now, and I'm supposed to tell other people how to manage their mental health problems, but I feel like I'm having mental health problems. And that's a tricky loop to get caught into too. So I needed to reach out and work with a psychologist who helped me get unstuck from some of those things and find my way forward. So, recognizing that there are those supports out there, Unfortunately, it's very rare to have a crisis and be able to get someone that you're seeing on the same day, like Kelly and Caitlin did. Often there are those wait lists, but if there is emergency things, there are crisis lines as well. And so lots of things potentially out there for people to access.
All right. So a lot more resources than just the closest phone book. Hey, Kelly?
Right, we always laugh at that because how unusual, people hear that now and they must go, what is a phone book, by the way?
Do you have anything else that you guys would add for resources or ways to work through this as a family?
Mainly just, I know it's so difficult when you're going through it that it's very hard to share because you feel as though you might be letting people down, but you're not. I think as a family member or a friend, as we said, ask questions and how are you really doing? But also look in their eyes. The eyes, that's not a clinical piece of advice. That's just, when you look at somebody, their eyes tell you a lot, right? Where they are. And so that's one that I sort of stick with. And just the other thing is when you start to get the help, like Caitlin and her husband Hayden have this isn't a plug to sell anything, but they have this shirt, and the company's called More Good Days Clothing. And that started from a line Caitlin gave us after 4 years of extensive therapy, that she said she's starting to have more good days than bad. I mean, that's so profound, but it's so important that if you all stick together and support each other, that is the ultimate goal, right? That we're all going to have more good days.
Mhm.
Yeah, we see that over your shoulder every week on hockey night. It's a
Right.
great reminder. Yeah, exactly. Guys, thanks so much for sharing your story. Dr. Sellis, thanks for sharing your expertise. And thanks for our sponsor, Anxiety Canada, for all of their contributions. You can go to menshealthfoundation.ca for more resources and to learn more about Men's Health Month activities. If you liked what you heard today, please like, comment, share this video, tag a friend. As national charities, the Canadian Men's Health Foundation and Anxiety Canada rely on donations to create relatable and engaging resources for Canadians. Every dollar raised from the event will fund mental health programming and services online to support Canadian men and their families. We've included a donation link in the description of this post. And next week is the final event, Wednesday, June 23rd. We'll be joined by TSN's national reporter Farhan Lalji, former CFL All-Star Shea Emery, and Anxiety Canada Scientific Committee co-chair and psychologist Dr. Maureen Whittall. The topic, how to be together while apart, making meaningful connections during the COVID-19 pandemic. I'm Buzz Bishop. Thanks a lot for joining us today. And please find time to move for your mental health.